You've seen the headlines, right? The ones that scream, bacon causes cancer. It's one of those topics that's just so confusing. You've got really strong opinions on all sides, scary articles, and honestly, just a lot of noise. So let's cut through all that. Let's really dig in and unpack what the science actually has to say. I mean, think about it. For literally thousands and thousands of years, meat has been a huge part of our story, of our evolution. But now, in our modern world, we have to ask a totally new question. Does this ancient food now come with a modern health risk? And to even begin to answer that, we have to get one thing straight right from the start. And this right here, this is probably the most important distinction in this whole conversation. On one side, you have fresh, unprocessed red meat. Think a steak or a roast. And on the other, you have processed meats, like sausages, hot dogs, and deli meats. Understanding the difference between these two is absolutely the key to making sense of everything else we're about to talk about. So before we could even get into the risk, we have to appreciate the context. For most of human history, meat wasn't just another thing on the plate. No way. It was completely central to our survival, to our cultures, to who we are. Okay, so let's get our terms crystal clear because it really matters. First, you've got red meat. That's basically meat from mammals, like beef and pork. That's red when it's raw. Then you've got white meat, your chicken, your turkey, fish. And finally, the one that gets all the attention, processed meat. This is any meat that's been changed by things like salting, curing, or smoking to preserve it or change the flavor. You'll want to keep these three categories in your head. And you see its importance everywhere in our past. I mean, it provided these incredible nutrient-dense packages of iron, B12, and protein that helped fuel our growing brains. But it was more than that, right? It became a symbol of a big celebration, of wealth, of community, from giant ancient feasts to the backyard barbecue you went to last weekend. It's always been more than just food, which is a big reason why this whole debate gets so emotional. Okay, so with all that history as a backdrop, let's fast forward. Let's jump to the exact moment this debate just exploded into the mainstream, all thanks to a landmark report from an organization called the IARC. So, who exactly is the IARC? Well, think of them as the Cancer Research Division of the World Health Organization. Their entire job is to bring together the world's top experts to sift through mountains of scientific evidence and figure out what things can cause cancer. So, when these guys talk, people listen. So back in 2015, this group of experts decided to take on meat. They dove into more than 800 different studies. I'm talking everything from massive studies of huge populations to tiny little experiments in a lab. And what they concluded, well, it sent absolute shockwaves across the globe, especially when it came to processed meat. And this was it. This was the headline. The IARC classified processed meat, so your bacon, your ham, your sausages, as a Group 1 carcinogen. Now that sounds absolutely terrifying because that's the same category as things like tobacco smoke and asbestos. But, and listen closely because this is the part almost everyone misses, Group 1 is about the strength of the evidence, not the level of danger. It just means scientists are as certain that processed meat can cause cancer as they are about smoking. It does not mean it's equally deadly. That's a huge difference. So what about that unprocessed red meat, like a steak? Well, that landed in Group 2A. Probably carcinogenic to humans. That word probably is everything here. It's a scientist's way of saying, look, there's some strong, compelling evidence pointing to a link, especially with colorectal cancer, but it's not quite the scientific slam dunk we have for processed meat. Okay, so if the evidence is pointing towards a risk, the obvious next question is why? What is actually happening at a biological level that could be causing a problem? Well, scientists have zeroed in on 4 main suspects. First up, you have these things called N-nitroso compounds, or NOCs. They can form when meat is cured, and they can also form inside our gut after we eat meat. The problem is, they can damage our DNA. Then you've got HCAs and PHs. These are chemicals that get created when you cook meat at really high temperatures. You know, that black, crispy char on a steak from the grill? That's them. And finally, there's heme iron. It's the very thing in red meat that makes it so rich in iron, but it might have a downside. It seems to help form more of those troublesome NOCs down in our colon. So we've seen the official classifications, and we've met the 4 main suspects. But now we get to what is, honestly, the most important part of this entire explainer, taking all those scary-sounding risks and putting them into real-world perspective.
And to do that, you have to understand the difference between two key ideas: relative risk and absolute risk. Relative risk is the one that makes the headlines. It's usually a big, dramatic percentage. But absolute risk? That's what the change in risk means for you as an individual. It's the number that actually matters. Let's see how this works with meat.
Here it is. This is the big number from that IIRC report that caused all of the panic. They found that for every 50 grams of processed meat you eat per day, and that's roughly 2 slices of bacon, your relative risk of getting colorectal cancer goes up by 18%. Now, 18% sounds like a massive jump, right? But what does that really mean for one person?
This is where it all clicks into place. Okay, so in the general population, the average person's lifetime risk of developing colorectal cancer is about 5%. That 18% increase isn't just added on top. No, it's 18% of that 5%. So your personal risk goes from 5% to about 5.9%. Your absolute risk only went up by less than 1%. See? That giant, scary headline number feels totally different now, doesn't it?
Okay, so the takeaway here is that the risk is real, but it's much smaller than the headlines make it sound. It's all about scale and context. Which brings us to the final and most practical question. What on earth are you supposed to do with all of this information?
Well, the science actually points to some really clear practical steps. First, try to think of processed meats like hot dogs and deli meats as an occasional food, not something you eat every single day. When you do cook meat, try not to char it. Lower temperature cooking is your friend. And maybe most important of all, balance your plate. If you're having meat, pile in the fiber-rich vegetables and fruits, which contain compounds that can help protect you. In the end, it all just comes back to that classic advice: moderation.
Ultimately, the science is not saying never eat meat again. It's not about fear, and it's not about completely eliminating things. What it's really asking for is a more mindful approach. It's about recognizing that one food is never the hero or the villain. It's your whole dietary pattern, the whole picture, that really matters. A piece of steak on a huge plate of colorful veggies is a world away from a daily hot dog and fries. So there you have it. We've gone from those crazy headlines all the way down to the scientific context. We've looked at the history, the big report that changed everything, and what the risk actually looks like in the real world. The science isn't giving you a command to stop eating meat. It's just giving you the information and the power to make more mindful choices. So the only real question left is, now that you have the context, what does a balanced plate look like to you?